Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'll just briefly touch on kind of our process of applying for a Habitat Aqua application permit for 2022. So as mentioned, my name is Jacob Kloeze, and I work for the Nature Conservancy of Canada. So just as a very brief overview, for those of you who don't know, NCC is Canada's leading private not-for-profit land conservation organization. While NCC works across Canada, I'll focus specifically on our work on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula, which is shown on the map on the right there. NCC staff have worked on controlling Phragmites on a landscape scale across the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula since 2020, using various control methods. To support these control efforts, we submitted multiple permits to MECP in 2022 for the use of Habitat Aqua. I'll focus specifically on kind of our largest control efforts, which are in the Elephant and Fishing Islands area. That's highlighted in red on the map there. Elephant is a small coastal community on the Lake Huron shoreline with a series of nearshore islands which provide suitable habitat for large stands of Phragmites to grow. So I'll just focus briefly on a couple of key areas of our application that may be of interest. So Elephant is a fairly busy seasonal destination. There's lots of seasonal residents, recreational activities such as fishing and windsurfing, and as such, landowner engagement and notification was a large part of our application process. Kind of the first step we took was a landowner notice that was distributed to properties within 1 kilometer of our treatment area. So that was considered any properties that could reasonably be impacted by our control work, whether that was through water use restrictions, property access via boat, etc. This notification was circulated to over 200 residents and provided an overview of ongoing Phragmites control efforts in Elephant since 2017, as well as planned control work in 2022, including the use of Habitat Aqua and its associated restrictions. We also included contact information and a link to our project website with further information and resources. And then finally, there was a notification of a public information session was also provided in that notice. So we held this public information session in Elephant in June of 2022 that allowed us to present to landowners and gave us an opportunity to answer any questions or concerns they may have. After that, a formal submission was submitted to MECP for the control of over 15 hectares of Phragmites in Elephant. Once that review is completed and we received the permit, there was a couple additional notification steps that we took prior to application. That included a control notification, which was circulated a minimum of 5 days prior to any application. And the permit we received had, specific information that needed to be included in this notice. That included such information as a herbicide to be used, your pest control product number, your dates of application, restrictions, again, specifically that water use restriction, contact information, and we did provide a link to our website, which allowed us to provide specific information on which stands of Phragmites were to be controlled on what day. And then finally, the last part was a more targeted control notification that we provided to residences within 1 kilometer of the treatment area with potable water intakes. And that notification was provided a minimum of 24 hours prior to application. And a sample of that's shown on the right there in terms of the Phragmites control notification. So that's a brief overview in terms of the engagement we did. There was certainly more. We did, included presentations to local cottage association, meeting with landowners, etc. And then regarding kind of the mapping and Phragmites data that we provided as part of our application, I'll briefly touch on how this information was collected and provided to MECP. So mapping of Phragmites stands and data collection was completed using an ArcGIS collector platform, which have both mobile and desktop applications. With that information, we produced a series of maps and spreadsheets that we submitted with our application. We provided a context map, which provided a project overview, and then coupled that with a series of detail maps. An example of a detail map shown on the right-hand side there. These detail maps were broken down by area, whether it was a specific island or shoreline stretch. and it included such information as, Phragmites polygons with ID numbers, property boundaries and identifiers, either a civic address or roll number, and other relevant information such as shore well locations. The supporting spreadsheets that were provided included relevant information such as, your Phragmites polygon sizes referring to those ID numbers, landowner permissions that were received, and any comments or objections received from landowners during our notification processes. And then finally, just in terms of additional supporting information that we sent in, included a summary of all landowner notifications. So that included that initial notification that was provided to over 200 residents, landowner signed landowner consent forms for control that was occurring on private lands, a summary of control equipment and methods used, including determination of when cut to drown versus habitat aqua application was occurring, what types of equipment we were using, etc. A signage plan for areas that general public access could occur, and that was done using standard pesticide warning signs. And then finally, a site inspection was completed by MECP staff to run through our application and answer any questions there. And then finally, just in terms of post-application reporting, so there was a requirement to provide information to MECP specific to habitat aqua application locations and volumes used. That data collection and reporting was completed in essentially the same process as our initial permit application. So that's a very quick run through of the application process there. I did want to acknowledge the Elephant Fishing Islands Phragmites Community Group, specifically Leslie Wood, who have led Phragmites control efforts in elephants since 2017, as well as the Invasive Phragmites Control Center, who completed the vast majority of these control efforts in elephant. And my contact information is listed there if there are any follow-up questions.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate that. I'm wondering if Tom is available and able to share.
Yep, we're going to try this again if you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
I'm going to share Tom's presentation here.
I'm going to leave my camera off. I might be running into some bandwidth problems. So.
Sounds great.
All right. Okay, that's full screen. All right, Tom, you just let me know when I need to switch slides.
Okay, thanks. So I thought I would just give a quick rundown of some of the things that we encountered this last year, as it was our first year really processing a wide number of Phragmites permits for the habitat herbicide. And as mentioned on a few occasions, as a ministry, we don't have a lot of experience with this particular product. So this year was kind of our learning year as well. If you want to move on to the first slide. So just in summary, we had 37 permits that we issued. It doesn't mean all those permits were used. I would imagine the majority of them were. We did, for some permits, ask that a report be provided to us just to give us an idea of how much of the permit was actually used in the areas that were treated. And those are really helpful to kind of help us for next year to determine, what areas we're looking at and how much we're looking at seeing be treated. Most of the application areas were in central and southwestern Ontario, with a few kind of up near the Kingston area. Application sizes were quite a range of sizes. We had some for just small areas, a few square meters, and others we had large treatment areas, several hectares in size. And that said, we didn't receive any reports of off-target impacts or non-target impacts at all. So right now, from our point of view, that seemed to be rather successful. And I think we're waiting to see from some of the reports what actually happened with the plants, how well it worked, the efficacy, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. Just a few things. If you're going to apply for a permit, a few things that we noticed, that the specialists and I had noticed this year. First thing is the application form. So this form is the legal document that gets you the permit. Anything else that we request is attached to this form. So this form is sort of the thing that we look through, and the one that gets saved, and that kind of links you to your permit. Just make sure that when you're filling this form out, that all the information is filled out on the form that's required. The area that's treated and the amounts of pesticide requested, they have to match the maps and the other support documentation that you have. There were some that may have been filled out prior to the formation of the actual areas to be treated and ended up having some maps show larger areas than was requested on the form. Just make sure that those two match. There is a section on the form that talks about adjacent properties and any objectors. We like that work to be done prior to the application being submitted. Reason for this is we want to know in advance if anyone who's adjacent to the application area who may be impacted by the application has had the chance to contact us and let us know. You can give them our information, and we will respond to any objectors that come up from that. We need you to sign the application form as well. We prefer that the person who signed the application form be a licensed exterminator of the aquatic vegetation class. This person will be responsible to ensure that all the conditions are met. So for example, if you are running a program and you are the person who was applying for the permit and you're going to be providing or hiring someone else to do the actual work, you still have some responsibilities to ensure that that permit is followed correctly. Any reporting requirements are the responsibility of the permit holder, so that'll be the person who applied for the permit. Okay, next please. Couple of comments on maps. In general, the maps were well done, but just a few things to think about when you're submitting maps. If you have multiple locations that you're treating and they're kind of a good distance apart, we do need an overall map to show where all those locations are. I just want to see which locations, where they are, how they relate to each other, and what's surrounding them. That's really important for us from the review process. When you look at the actual area you're treating, that area of the application sites, you need to include the size of the application area that you're treating on the map, or provide on that map an identifier that can link to another document that says that the size of that application area. We need these to kind of assess what's being done in a certain location. So I want to know what that size is when I'm looking at the map. I don't want to have to remeasure that and estimate, right? If you're using aerial view maps or aerial maps from Google or whatever, make sure those maps are sharp. They're not pixely. I need to be able to determine where that application is. We do have systems that we can look for various things like water taking permits and that sort of stuff that we do for our review. And I want to have an idea of where exactly that site is. Speaking of water intakes, if there is within a kilometer of your application site a potential for a drinking water source to be there. So for example, if some cottagers are pulling water from a lake, or even any non-potable water source, just from our point of view for the review, I would like to know that you looked for it. So I have and did request information on some cottages or locations that may have had water intakes from some permit applicants. So just be cognizant of that and know that we'll be asking those questions. Also, property boundaries between application sites and other areas are what I'd like to see on the maps as well. This just sort of helps us determine who needs to be notified and if notification signs or other contents of notice might be needed for the extermination. If you know of any or any sensitive vegetation in the area that might be impacted by the spray, we would like to know about that too. There are situations where we might not be able to get out and do a site visit, depending on the number of permits that we have in and our ability to travel. So if we may ask for more information on that, and if you're aware of any like species at risk or sensitive vegetation, please include that on the map as well. Okay, next please. So lastly, just going to talk about notifications. So this is more about the on-site notification of the spray area after application. And these are kind of really going to be dependent on the attributes of the spray area. So if it's a small little area in the middle of nowhere, we might not require any notification of that because the possibility of someone encountering that area is very, very low. There are areas that are more well-traveled, and in those areas, we will require some form of notification. It's a good idea to let us know your proposed method of notification in your permit application. If you're doing a larger program, we will require you to submit a notification plan. So if you're going to be doing a very large scale project like the Oliphant application, we'll want to see what you've done, because you're going to be applying the pesticide to various areas and various locations near a lot of different use areas, so fishing areas, off the coast, off someone's cottage, etc. The permit conditions are going to outline the requirements for notification. In some cases, if it's just a small area, the notification requirements will be quite simple, posting a sign. In other areas, it might be a little more complex as to where exactly to post the signs. Okay, so that will be put on the permit condition in consultation with the applicant. So we'll get a hold of you and talk to you about where we might want to find some signs and where we might want to see notification done. So just to sum up, please get your applications in as early as you can. We are updating the permit application guide this year, and it hopefully will be submitted for final approvals, but we will be able to provide a draft to those who need it. So you can contact your regional pesticide specialist. We do have a full complement of pesticide specialists this year, so we have one in each region, so we're ready to process. Be aware that if you apply for the permits like around April, May, or June, that is our most busiest time for permits. So things might get a little hectic. Earlier is always better, just to ensure that we have the time to review, and if we have to set up a site visit, that we can make it out to see you. My information, I think, is available. If not, just let me know and I can put it in the chat. And that is all I have, so I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. And Jacob, we really appreciate it. We are running